The dog showed up on a Tuesday, which was not a day that usually produced anything worth noting on Havel's Crossing. She was sitting in the middle of Terrace Row when Peary Sousa first saw her, sitting in the packed earth lane between the human residential block and the Thurvian quarter like she had decided that spot was hers, and the street had not caught up yet. She was medium-sized, built low and solid, with a coat that was black and white and copper-patched, and that had not been brushed in some time. One ear stood up and one folded. Her eyes were mismatched, one brown, one pale blue, and both were watching the Thurvian quarter with a calm, proprietary interest. Peary was 10 years old and had been on Havel's Crossing for 7 months. She knew the rules of Terrace Row as well as any child could. The humans stayed on their side, the Thurvians stayed on their side, the Gathrak family on the corner end stayed out of both arguments and mostly managed it, and nobody used the middle lane for anything except passing through as fast as possible without making eye contact. The dog was sitting exactly in the middle of the middle lane. "You can't sit there," Peary told her. The dog looked at her. The brown eye and the pale blue eye were both equally unimpressed. Peary sat down next to her. She did not have a plan when she did it. She was 10 and lonely, and the dog was warm and solid, and had apparently decided that the worst spot on Terrace Row was fine by her, and that logic made sense to Peary in a way that the rest of Havel's Crossing had not. The dog leaned against her shoulder. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, the dog had a name. Peary called her Patch, for obvious reasons, and had eaten half a ration bar and discovered the water tap at the base of the community cistern, which she turned on by batting the lever with one paw, as if she had always known how taps worked and found it surprising that people bothered to mention it. By Wednesday afternoon, she had met everyone on Terrace Row whether they wanted to meet her or not. She started with old Myra Cossett in Unit 4, because Myra Cossett's front step was in the sun, and Patch had decided that sun was a reasonable first priority. Myra Cossett opened her door to let the cat out and found a medium-sized dog sitting on her step with one ear up and one folded, watching the lane with the focused attention of someone who had taken on a job nobody had advertised. Myra Cossett said, "What are you doing on my step?" Patch wagged once, a slow, measured wag, and then looked back at the lane. Myra left her door open when she went back inside, which was not something she usually did, and Peary saw it from across the lane and did not say anything about it. The Thurvian quarter was harder. The Thurvians in Units 12 through 19 were a mixed household cluster, 3 families, 4 trade workers, and one older male named Sethvad who had been on Havel's Crossing since before the human section went in. They were not unfriendly so much as they had learned to be precise about distances, which was a different thing. The middle lane was the middle lane. Patch did not find this complicated either. She simply did not observe it. She appeared in the Thurvian quarter on Wednesday afternoon when Sethvad was sitting outside Unit 14 sorting trade ledgers in the flat pre-evening light. She sat down 4 paces from him with the air of someone completing an appointment she had made with herself. She did not approach further. She simply sat there, looking at the far end of the lane, which happened to also be roughly where Sethvad was looking. He watched her for a while. She did not look at him. She was watching a pair of juveniles from the human block throwing a ball against the cistern wall, and she was watching them with the same focused, proprietary attention she turned on everything, as if her job was to observe the street and she took it seriously. Sethvad went back to his ledgers. Patch stayed for 40 minutes. Then she got up and trotted back toward the human side and paused halfway across the middle lane, exactly in the middle, and sat down again for a while, looking both ways before continuing. Peary watched all of this from the doorway of Unit 7, where she lived with her father, who worked supply logistics and was not home most days until the second bell. She had been eating an apple, and she had stopped eating it to watch. She thought Patch knew something about the lane that the rest of them were still working out. Thursday brought the first complication. Davin Emrost lived in Unit 3 and had opinions about the Thurvian trade practices, the Gathrek family's noise, the colony administration's supply allocation, and most things in general. He came out of Unit 3 on Thursday morning and found Patch sleeping across his front step, not on it, across it, with her head on one flagstone and her back end on another, blocking the door with the calm indifference of an animal that had calculated that this was where she needed to be and found the math sufficient. "Get," Davin Emrost said. Patch opened her eyes. She looked at him with both eyes, the brown one and the pale one, and her tail moved once in a slow acknowledgement. "I said get." The tail moved again. Davin Emrost looked up and found Peary watching from across the lane. "Is this your dog?" "She's a stray," Peary said. "She just likes your step." "She's blocking my door." "She does that, she'll move in a bit." Davin Emrost looked back at Patch. Patch was looking at something in the middle lane. There was nothing in the middle lane except the packed earth and, at the far end, the Thurvian quarter beginning. Two of the Thurvian trade workers were walking toward the cistern. They glanced across at the sound of raised voices and then glanced away. Patch watched them all the way to the cistern and back. Davin Emrost sat down on his own stoop, next to where Patch was sleeping. He did not do this consciously. He did it the way you do something when you are waiting to be annoyed and the annoyance has not arrived yet, and sitting is easier than standing. He sat there for 20 minutes. Patch did not move. She had gone back to sleep. The two Thurvian trade workers passed again on their way back. The taller one, Peary later learned her name was Hevel, glanced at the stoop and glanced away, then glanced back. The sight of Davin Emrost sitting next to a sleeping dog was apparently different from the sight of him standing in his doorway looking at them, and Peary watched Hevel stride loosen from the brisk do-not-acknowledge walk to something more ordinary. Davin Emrost did not notice. He was watching the dog sleep. "What breed is it?" he said, not to anyone in particular. "Australian Shepherd," Peary said. He turned that over for a moment. "Never seen one." "They're herding dogs," Peary said. "They like to keep track of things." He looked at the lane, and then at the dog, and then at the lane again, and Peary thought he was beginning to understand something she hadn't been able to explain yet. By Friday the situation had, depending on who you asked, either improved or become confusing. Patch had mapped the entire row. She knew every door, every step, every occupied window. She knew when the Gathrek family woke up because she was outside their door when they opened it, and she fell in beside old Myra Cossett on her afternoon walk, one ear up, the length of the lane and back. She did not ask for anything from any of them. She appeared when she appeared, and she sat where she needed to sit, and she watched the street with the particular attention of something that had understood what the street was for, and found its current use insufficient. The Thurvian juveniles, two of them, both around Peary's height, who she had seen playing kickball in the Thurvian quarter, appeared at the edge of the middle lane on Friday afternoon. They stood there with the practiced stillness of children who want to approach something and have not yet decided if it is allowed. Patch solved this by getting up and walking to the middle of the lane and sitting down. She did not go to them. She did not beckon them. She simply relocated to the middle, which was equidistant from both sides, and sat. The juveniles looked at each other. One of them took 3 steps into the lane. Peary, who had been doing nothing useful from her doorway for 4 days, took 3 steps out of her doorway. They met at the dog. The Thurvian juvenile closest to her had reddish-brown scaling and large yellow eyes, and went by the name of Ven, which Peary discovered 2 minutes into an increasingly elaborate mime conversation about whose dog this was. Patch sat between them and watched the mime conversation with apparent satisfaction. Her tail was doing the slow wag. "She's not mine," Peary said. then realized Ven probably didn't have her language yet and tried again with gestures. Pointed to herself, shook her head, pointed to Patch, spread her hands. Ven pointed to the dog, then to the lane. Then made a gesture Peary, interpreted as she lives here. Yeah, Peary said, I think so too. Seth Vod came out of Unit 14 at the third bell and found the two children sitting in the middle of Terrace Row's lane with a dog between them. He stopped walking. Davin Emrost, who had come out to check if the water ration timer had run, also stopped. They were on opposite sides of the lane. The children and the dog were in the middle. Nobody said anything for a moment. Patch looked from one adult to the other with the systematic attention she gave everything, and her tail moved. Seth Vod said something in Thurvian that Peary did not understand. Davin Emrost did not understand it either, but the tone was not unfriendly, and he understood that much. She's a herding dog, Davin Emrost said, to no one in particular, in the same wondering tone people used when they were putting something together. She's been herding the street. Seth Vod looked at him for a moment, which was the first time Peary had seen them look directly at each other in 7 months. Then he looked at the dog. Then he made a sound that she thought might be a laugh. The colony administrator filed a notice on Saturday. It was a reasonable notice. A stray animal in a residential corridor, unregistered, no verified owner, health status unknown. Standard protocol required the animal to be transferred to the colony animal holding facility. The notice was addressed to Terrace Row Common Board, which technically existed, but had not met in 11 months, because nobody had been willing to sit in the same room as everybody else. Peary's father read the notice and looked at Patch, who was asleep on their floor, and then at Peary, and did not say anything for a while. She fixes things, Peary said. She's a dog, her father said. She herds people, Peary said. She's been doing it all week. She sits between everybody and she watches until people stop pretending they're the only ones on the block. Her father reread the notice. We'd need a Terrace Row Common Board vote to formally register a community animal. Can we call a meeting? Peary asked. Hasn't been a meeting in almost a year, her father said. Can you try? He looked at Patch again. Patch was breathing in the slow rhythm of deep sleep, one ear twitching. She looked entirely unconcerned about the colony administrator's notice, which Peary thought was either the most relaxed or the most confident thing she had ever seen. Her father sent the meeting request at the 4th bell. Sunday's meeting was the first Terrace Row Common Board session in 11 months, and it was held in the lane. Nobody could agree on whose unit to use, so they held it outside, which meant everyone stood in the middle lane with the late afternoon sun going gold and the Gathrak family present on one end and Seth Vod, and 2 other Thurvian residents on the other, and Davin Emrost in the middle and Peary sitting on the ground because her legs were tired and Patch sitting beside her. The colony administrator's representative attended via comm unit, which Peary's father held while Patch periodically sniffed at it. The vote took 11 minutes. It was unanimous, which surprised the representative, who had clearly expected a dispute. The formal resolution registered Patch as Terrace Row Community Animal under joint stewardship, with feeding and medical costs shared across the residential units. The representative noted that this was only the 2nd time in the settlement's history that a Terrace Row Common Board had returned a unanimous vote on any question. When the call ended, Peary's father looked at Patch, and then at the assembled residents of both sides of the lane, and then back at Patch. Old Myra Cossett had brought a bowl of water from her unit. Seth Vod had brought something wrapped in cloth that turned out to be dried protein strips the Thurvians used for travel rations, and which, it turned out, Patch found perfectly acceptable. Hevel, the taller trade worker, had carried over a flat cushion from the Thurvian quarter without explanation, and set it down in the lane, and Patch was already walking toward it with the ease of something that had known the cushion was coming. She circled once and lay down. Vin sat on one side of her, Peary sat on the other. Davin M. Rost and Seth Vaude were standing together at the edge of the middle lane, not talking yet, but not talking either, which was the first time in 7 months that this had been true. Peary's father sat down on the packed earth of the lane, which was something she had never seen him do. He sat the way adults sit when something has shifted in the arrangement of the world, and they have decided to stop standing while they figure it out. The sun kept moving. Patch's tail moved in the slow wag that meant everything was being watched, and everything was accounted for. Peary put her hand on the dog's side and felt her breathe. 2 weeks later, the colony administrator received a document requesting that the animal's official status be updated from community animal, unregistered stray, to community anchor, Terrace Row, Havel's Crossing, a category the settlement's registration system did not technically have. There was a footnote attached. The classification had been submitted jointly by the Terrace Row Common Board, which had by that point met 4 times, and which had not once in those 4 sessions required anyone to be asked to leave. The administrator sat with the form for a long time. Then she made the category. She wrote in the notes field, behavior observed, classification stands.